Okay, good afternoon. Welcome everybody. Today it is an honor for our group, the Film Studies Research Group, to have Roger Hunt. An honor and a pleasure. As I was telling him, this is our first presentation in English, so it's going to be a challenge. The first time I got to know about Roger was when I started reading this book, The Big Lebowski and Philosophy, and one of the chapters that attracted my attention was especially his, which deals with, as it is the title of this presentation, the Big Lebowski's Oedipal complex. Well, the book deals basically with the film and its relationship with obviously philosophy, feminism, existentialism, and so on. As in our group, we're very interested in studying this very interesting relationship between psychoanalysis and films. Obviously, we thought that Roger Hunt would be a great guest. So thank you again, Roger, for accepting the invitation, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
First of all, I'd like to know how did you first, what was your first encounter with the film, and how did you end up writing a paper, a chapter for this book?
Oh my, I was a teenager when I first watched this movie and had no idea what I was watching. I think I was probably too young or too immature to understand where it was going, but it was funny and people were yelling in it and using bad words, so I enjoyed it very, very much. The book, Peter, so the series, the And Philosophy series, several published. Blackwell Wiley has a series where they do, you can submit a topic of pop culture and then you go and you recruit your fellow friends, philosophers, academics, whatever, to write a chapter for it, and then you publish it. It's a lot of fun. We don't have strict standards. Well, not necessarily standards, but we don't the strict academic review process to do these things. So we get to have fun and we get to be experimental with what we're thinking about and kind of get to go crazy. And so I had always loved the books. I submitted a paper and Peter accepted it, which was fantastic. And so I tried to have fun with it. The paper is called The Big Lebowski's Oedipal Complex. And that so one way to read that is, one of the characters in The Big Lebowski, or maybe it's the dude, or maybe it's Papa Lebowski, maybe one of them is going through the Oedipal complex, and we'll analyze that character's transformation. That's one way to read the title, but I mean it in a slightly different form. And so actually for this discussion, I was hoping to have be kind of two-part discussion. One on explaining what that title means, which I would consider like the background theory of how I'm coming at the movie and actually all movies. And then two, once we've explained that and people have asked critical questions of that theory, which I expect some, which was perfectly wonderful. I love going a little back and forth. Inviting you to join me in that perspective and see if we don't necessarily have to go through my paper and say, what did I think about the character? How did I think it all worked together? But I would be more interested in hearing, if we take that position, what do you all think? How do those pieces line up to your psychoanalytic theory for Freudianism in particular. So what we do sort of two parts, which will explain that title, and then hopefully give us a chance to experiment a little and think through. Maybe I have it completely wrong. Maybe some parts of it are right. Who knows? Well, we can find out.
Okay, yeah, that was clear from the very beginning that you want this more as a conversation, as a dialogue. So the members of the group, please, I ask them to join the conversation. But before talking about the film itself, you told me you were going to make an introduction on how you see films and how you can see the unconscious through films, the unconscious of any subject.
Yes. You still have me?
Yes.
I'm back
now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So when I wrote this paper, I did not have any kind of grand theory in mind. I just sort of started writing it. And the way I wrote it was I took different pieces of the really Freud's general theory, if we can call that, of the unconscious. And I synced up different characters to represent different parts of that. So, you have the life drive and the death drive, and those fused together to a thing, which then sort of grows and matures and goes through different conflicting stages. Goes through the oral phase, the anal phase, the genital phase, the Oedipal complex, and the genital phase. And so then I tried to analyze the movie as, okay, what's going on? Who are all these characters, and how do they line up with those different pieces that Freud is talking about? And just as an example, I read or I watched Donnie, the dude, and Walter as Donnie as representing the kind of the oral phase of development. So as Freud's character, subject unconscious is going through, you never sort of transition out of the oral phase and into the anal phase. They sort of come with you the whole way. So you have hang-ups or fixations from each phase stays with you in each thing. And especially when you're younger, as you're going into adolescence, into the Oedipal phase, one could say that they're all sort of it's all confused. And so all this stuff isn't really worked out yet. You haven't formed your personality yet. So I read, Donnie as the representation of the oral phase, sort of passive, just letting things happen to it, right? The mother's nipple is coming and you're drinking, right? And then Walter is representing the anal phase, right? That he was an anal character. It would be you're out of your element, right? And actually, that he's got such a tension with Donnie is really interesting as well. I thought that made a lot of sense because he's supposed to be the new one. All right, and then the dude is coming through as the sort of the new character that's emerging as the psyche that is the film goes into the Oedipal phase. So this is focusing on the dude and the dude's experience of the world as he's about to navigate a very complex, the Oedipal complex, very complex situation with these two fixations kind of coming up with him. So anyway, so I go through the rest of the paper and sort of assigning every character in the book to, the life drive, the death drive, the super ego, and all this great stuff. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, right? So and after writing this, I guess I did this backwards. After writing this, I started to think that, hey, a lot of, because you know what? When I wrote this, A Serious Man had just come out, another Coen Brothers film, and it had very similar themes to it, with the character going through a sort of, progression. he's teaching, then he's dealing with his wife's adulterer, and then he's dealing with the priest, and he just keeps going through all these things, learning lessons. Now that movie's in a different, dealing with a different complex. I hadn't written that one up yet, but I think if we were going to. Anyways, so I noticed that, and then I started to develop this kind of theory that, when we're watching movies, I think what we're seeing is the unconscious, as distinct from when you have a patient on the couch, talking, well, hopefully talking, and giving you some kind of grist for the mill to work with. In that scenario, you have to interpret everything. You have to interpret what they're saying, what they're doing. Did they come late? Did they bring you a gift? What's the transference in the room? How am I feeling? What's the counter? You have to try to put a piece together of who this person is, and then analyze all that. It takes years, 20 years more to do it, if it's ever even possible to do it. And yet, when I was watching these movies, I was like, oh, we don't have to really interpret anything. Freud's all right there on the screen. And I wonder if we can do more of this. So then I started to sort of generalize this theory of, I think when, and this is why, please criticize me or explain to me, or not explain, but ask questions about this once I say it. But I think, movies can allow us to see the unconscious without having to go through all the interpretive leaps that we typically have to with a patient on the couch. And I even go as far as to suggest that, rather than putting, analysts in training actually with patients, just have them watch a whole bunch of movies and analyze them this way. And then they might be ready to take the next step into something like that. So actually, this is almost came into a training tool for future analysts. But and this idea of when you're watching film, you're seeing the unconscious, is distinct from other ways people have thought we should watch film or can watch film in the past, such as, what is the director or the writer, what are they trying to tell us? What story are they trying to tell us? If we're going to psychoanalyze the film, are we really psychoanalyzing the author? Charlie Kaufman is a great writer for this type of analysis, right? You can watch his films and you I'm going to analyze Kaufman through analyzing the film. Other ways to watch films are, as a kind of put together social critique, which you have to kind of deconstruct and reframe in different ways, and then you can use that to understand different parts of the world. These are all interesting, but the more, when I was writing this and the more I was thinking about it, I was thinking, I think we're watching the unconscious, and we should be, watching film in a way that it's evidence as where, that we can use to write papers on how the unconscious functions, which we can then use to better understand our patients. And again, not in the context of analyzing a specific character or analyzing a general commentary or analyzing the author, but analyzing the film as a whole. So when I say the Big Lebowski's Oedipal complex, I mean the film, the psyche that is the Big Lebowski. At its state, we're getting a snapshot of its stage of development where it's encountering the Oedipal complex. Now, there might be a film out there which is the midlife crisis of this perhaps singular psyche, singular being, and there might be another film that is showing some Kleinian split earlier on, however it works out. But this one we get to see the Oedipal complex. So anyway, I'd be curious to hear what you think about that as a way to watch movies, or I
Right.
just keep blathering on.
Right. Yes, they're very interesting in joining the conversation. Osmar or Pablo, I don't know who's first, or Pablo.
Osmar raised his hand.
Okay,
go
okay,
ahead.
Osmar.
Okay, thanks. First of all, thanks for opening up this space. I watched the movie again, so that was a lot of fun. And then being able to read the paper and reinterpret, or giving it a new reading, was I also enjoyed it a lot. So I wanted to open a new
I think we lost.
Yeah. Osmar, are you there? Uh, mm, so well, he's back again. Paulo.
Yeah. So hi everyone. I'm very. I gotta say I'm a fan of the movie. Yeah. I was right before I watched it like 100 times, and then as Osmar was saying, getting to have this new perspective, which was quite interesting, and it was a really nice reading, I gotta say. But before I get into the actual topics of the text and some things that I would like to say to you, when you were talking earlier and you said that you were thinking of movies almost as a training tool for psychoanalysis, for example, I also laughed a little bit, but it's not that utopian, because we are actually here in this group, we're working on the same thing, but with teachers. So we're working on how teachers create, for example, transference with their students. And we're almost connecting that as if students were patients, because in a way, this ultimately relates to the same thing, the Oedipus complex. So I wanted to highlight that and tell you that you're not alone. I also think it will be a great tool. Yeah. And when you mentioned the midlife crisis film, maybe, I don't know, but Lost in Translation might be a good example of that. Don't know. And then I see that Osmar is back again, so maybe.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay,
Because,
all right.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm thinking about many things here, but the main idea is that I love the text, the reading, because it's like you portray or you explain the film as a character rather as a division of characters, and that is quite. It's not easy to do. I mean, sometimes you see things in the film and you create some kind of connections. Here, as you said, you assigned a role to almost every character, and it aligned so perfectly that you would almost think that the Coen brothers did this on purpose. But we go to the same discussion with films. It's like, does the director create these narratives thinking about these kind of things? Mostly not. I mean, the answer has to be not most of the time. But that's the thing. It's unconscious, so we don't really access that kind of things, but they are there. However, when you assign the role of the superego to two characters, I think it was the stranger and the sheriff, I agreed mostly with the sheriff, but I had some trouble with the stranger, because the stranger, I think it's a rather special one. I would almost say it's extra diegetic in the sense that he's with us too. He's almost a part of the audience because he talks to the camera. He has access to everything that is happening. Sorry, he doesn't talk to the camera. He speaks to us. So I was thinking, maybe isn't he some kind of, I don't know, phantasmatic figure, phantasmatic in the sense of fantasy, that has the special powers of accessing what we can't access, and he's kind of explaining it to us. Not completely, but he's kind of explaining that to us. So I thought about that, and I'm, as you said, saying stuff that comes to my mind just to create the dialogue. But yeah, that's one of the things that crossed my mind when I was reading this awesome paper. And for now, I think that's it.
That's fantastic. And you picked out exactly the point in the paper where I felt the most confused, because I was like, I got to give it to one of these guys. And I was like, hey, maybe there's a split superego. And that's actually another part of this is Freud. Okay. I think Freud pretty much nailed it. I mean, Everything is footnotes to Freud or reimagine. I mean, this is just that probably isn't that weird to say. It is sort of weird to say like, oh, I think Freud had us down. Although that'll sometimes get a reaction out of people. But there can certainly be slight modifications to the overall structure. And so when I was writing that, I was thinking, oh, maybe there's this, maybe because he's in the Oedipal phase is where you sort of, I was where your superego sort of forms in a way that it's kind of on your side. Like when you're going through it, the father figure is sort of throughout your life stepping in and playing that role because you don't have the mental energy to sort of do it on your own. And then as you kind of fight against that, you start to develop your own. And so I was thinking that it was kind of like the superego is split at that point, and as you're going through the Oedipal complex, it's part of as it comes together, and then you no longer need the pieces. That's kind of where I was thinking of it, but that was a very awkward passage for me to write because I don't think it was right. And I think I thought you were about to say that Sam Elliott was kind of like a therapist. What you really said was he's outside of the film. He's kind of us in the film, us watching it, and that I like that a lot. But or maybe it's fantastical, but I don't know that it needs to be fantastical. I think it can be, there is, when you go into therapy as a child, I'm trying to remember, I guess. I mean, the therapist sort of sticks out. It's this as this odd, different thing, right? As you're coming up through that, and that is kind of so. I think you're right. He is outside. Maybe he represents us, the viewer, but of course, us, the viewer, we're the psychoanalyst in this situation. So he might represent as a kind of like teaching tool within the film. Which goes to your other point is, do they know what they're doing? And I absolutely think that I don't think they missed a beat at all. The Coen brothers, I wish they would write, and if there is one, please tell me. I wish they would write their theory of story and film. If we can shed Joseph Campbell, that would be wonderful. And move on to Ethan and Joel Coen, get rid of the hero's journey and go to something I think a little more mature. A mature way of telling stories, which I think is what the Coen brothers do. So if they've written an article in the last 10 years, or maybe they did it before that I'm not aware of, please point me there. And if they haven't, let's get a petition together and ask them to tell us. That I doubt they will. I like that a lot better. Yeah, that's right. The superego is not split. It is I like that a lot better. Thank you so much. That is wonderful.
Thank you.
I was hoping that would happen. Call me out and just be like, "Oh, yeah, that's right." Like, thank you. I don't think it's right either. Good. Thank you. Wonderful.
Yeah, I think it's the same. The stranger as an analyst. Interesting.
And
Yeah.
It's the dude's experience of what we as the viewer are like. Right? The child who's in therapy is experiencing the teacher or the therapist, probably in a way that the teacher or the therapist completely isn't. So we get to see how the dude is seeing us while we're watching. That's nice. That's nice. Good. That's really nice. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Osmar is back with us again. So
yeah. Oh, thanks. Sorry for the connection. So yeah, I was gonna ask Roger if this happened to him as it happened to me. The first time you watch the movie, it really feels like a kind of satire or parody with film noir, right? It's a detective-ish guy in Los Angeles. There's a femme fatale, there's money going on, there's a mystery, there's this dark characters. There, Jeff Lebowski becomes kind of a Sam Spade whole plot there, but he is an unwilling detective. He's cracking the case, but there's even a detective that's following him, and he says, "Oh, I admire your work. You're working every angle." And he's like, oh yeah, but he's not a detective. He just got in that whole chaos. And so when I saw that, and after reading the paper, I thought, yeah, it makes sense that you know, it is a coming of age film in that sense. This guy is suddenly immersed in all this chaos. You know, people, everyone is looking for what they want, as you pointed out in the beginning of the paper. They're narcissistic. Everyone's looking to, you know, the Lebowski's daughter wants to get the money back. The big Lebowski wants to get rid of Bonnie. Bonnie wants to have fun. Jeff just wants a rug, right? So it makes sense with the whole analysis, because the world portrayed in a noir film, for example, you know, that whole mystery is a, you know, mature, complex world, whereas whereas Jeff is, you know, just a guy that wants to have a good time, right? So I really thought that putting that noir film plot against this, you know, very chaotic guy, or very childish guy, just as Jeff Lebowski, makes a lot of sense for your interpretation. You know, it is a complex world, a noir world, and this guy is entering it unwillingly, as it happens with coming of age.
Yeah. He is unwilling, and he is stumbling around, and is just trying to survive it. And I think that's very much the experience of growing up, or even being grown up, that you go through. And to follow up on a comment I made earlier about getting rid of the hero's journey, you know, the concept of directedness, that an intentionality that is present in stories that model off of the hero's journey is I don't know, it's not right. It's not the way things are. And so I think that you put it really well. And of course, the other guy was like, you seem to be really know what you're doing. It's like, I actually don't even know what's going on. And it's I always forget that, right, he's in there trying to get his rug back. I mean, they say it so many times, but you get lost in there. All the time. And I had another no, you mentioned film noir. I know. I started thinking about Chinatown. Because the detective in that, he has no idea what's going on either. he's just so. And now I'm starting to think of the Coen brothers as, I mean, there's an obvious correlation to Polanski. Polanski does it in The Ninth Gate too, which is just so cool. Like the sort of unwitting genius, but unwitting, but no idea. Yeah, no, I think that I'm unaware, yeah, type thing is so important, and I'm trying to, yeah, I think that might be the crux to go after the Joseph Campbell vision. There is no directedness. There's, you know, and another thing that comes to mind is Christopher Bolas. I don't have a reference for this, and I don't know if you all read Bolas at all. Well, psychoanalyst Christopher Bolas, he has a really nice metaphor of development as just like this ball floating through and just smashing into things, or at least the way I read it, and getting dented all over the place. So by the end of it, you know, you're just this dented ball of a person that you've got to then try to analyze all the edges and the curves of the dents in the ball, and that becomes, you know, it's kind of like the analysis. Where did all those bumps come from? All those dents come from? Dude certainly gets dented up, as does Polanski's character in Chinatown. Very interesting.
Yeah, the cool thing about Chinatown is that, you know, he is a detective. That's his job. But like, yeah, like,
well, he's
Jeff
a private detective. There's less authority. There's less authority there. Yeah. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Now that you mentioned Chinatown, and you said the detective has no idea, we can also say that that's basically the place of the analyst. The analyst doesn't know anything about you or about the patient. So
they have to resist knowing anything while they're in it, because the second you start thinking, I know what's going on here.
Yeah.
Patient's lost. If they don't quit and stop paying you, at least they're never going to get any benefit from the situation, and then you've got to cut it off for ethical reasons. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we have to retain that the acceptance of uncertainty.
Yes. Well, you were referring to the Coen's filmography, films, and I think if you take many of the Coen brothers films, in a way you can see, well, you could do psychoanalysis in a way, in terms of the absence. For example, there's an absence in almost all films. In Fargo, there's an absence. In Arizona Baby, there's an absence. Here, there's an absence, and so on. So it's interesting, maybe to make an analysis in those terms. That not only a film serves the purposes of seeing the unconscious, but maybe the whole filmography of a director.
Absence is so important, and are we wading into Lacan here? The absence is where the desire comes from, right? And the whole problem here is desire. How does that work? Why does it work the way that it does? And what structures are built up around striving generally to do this, or to just live or grow. And well, I mean, I say live or grow as though it were intentional. I mean, living and growing is a biological thing. I mean, you have no choice but to live or grow. And what has kind of popped up around that. And so I would argue that we should watch every movie this way, and if this was to become a research project, we would just take every film and run one of these analyses, right? And just like you would take every tree and run an analysis on, figure out what kind of bark it is or whatnot. But I think some films, just like some experiments and some evidence, are certainly better suited for such an analysis and of them. And the Coen brothers specifically are just so wonderful for it. And to the point now where I haven't written about this recently, but I definitely think about it all the time. And I find myself judging films based on how difficult it is to do this type of assignment, and I'm not so. It's pretty reliable whether a movie's good or not. Like, I don't like Inception. I can't stand Inception, and it's not really amenable to this type of analysis. So there you go. So some anecdote on what movies I like and whether or not we should. Yeah.
Okay. As we're going through YouTube, well, it is open to comments and questions. I don't know if there's any. Alex?
No, not yet.
No, not yet. Okay. Well, what I find particularly interesting about your paper is that, I mean, I think it's pretty open in terms that you see psychoanalysis or psychoanalytic analysis of films not as something like fixed. I mean, it's like you can take, or that's what I understand. You can take the dude as living in the pre-Oedipal complex, or at the same time, if you change your perspective, you can see going through the Oedipal complex. Is that right?
So if we're going, if I can convince everybody that this is how we should watch movies, that's exactly the type of argument I think we would want to have. Is I think it would go something like, okay, here's our background understanding of the psyche, and we'll just say that's Freud, right? And then we'll watch a film and try to assign all the characters to different parts of the psyche, try to figure out which phase it's going through. Does that phase conform to any given archetype, such as an Oedipal complex, or a later neurosis, or a bipolar disorder, or whatever. I say bipolar disorder. Freud did hysteria. Whatever. And then as we find, as what happened over the history of psychoanalysis, as you find things that don't necessarily fit the bill, you develop new structures and concepts to help you understand that. And that's the end of the day, what we're trying to do. Trying to understand this person's on the couch and they're talking about this stuff, and what on earth is going on. I'm thinking, again, this is speculative. If we do this type of research on enough movies, we will start to find a whole bunch of things. Now, whether that's reified or if we're actually finding something. Everybody who doesn't like Freud will just say you're just interpreting everything to be Freudian because you want it to be, but what are you gonna do? So yeah, I think we could watch a whole bunch of movies and try to analyze them, and we can disagree over who plays what part in that analysis of the film, and then in order to come at it from an intellectually honest place, it would be did we learn something new here, or did we learn something more about what we already know, or something like that. Such a research program, I don't know that it would ever have take off or work. Your question is precisely the types of discussions that we like to have. That said, I mean, we can go through it, right? Did I miss it? And this isn't really the Oedipal complex. And I actually think there's a case for that, because the father and the mother figures, which I have outlined as Jeff and Maud, they seem, I don't know, they seem too far away from Lebowski for it to be a proper Oedipal complex. And I think that children going through the Oedipal complex would have closer relationships with both. You'd have to do some more research on that. And so suppose that's the case, that they are too far away, and the dude is the psyche at this phase in more of a pre-Oedipal situation. However, there's the obvious, he's fighting and attacking, and then of course having sex with Maud. Almost as it could be thought of as he's entered, if we're going to put him in a pre-Oedipal phase like that, he's entered the Oedipal complex too early, before he's ready, before he's combined well enough with his Oedipal and thing. Even though the Oedipal complex is in a sense supposed to be part of that formation, maybe it happened too early, and maybe that's why he stumbles so much. He doesn't have a good one because he's just not ready for it. He's not ready for it, but the world had other plans for him.
Stumbles literally, because we have to remember the scene in which he opens the door and he stumbles over.
That's right. He trips right over the brick put in place by those two goobers. Well, I don't have a good explanation for what those two guys are. The Miterator and the other guy. I guess they're part of Jackie's clan, so they would be part of the super ego. then the death drive comes in. I've got the nihilists as the death drive. They come in and attack later. He does stumble.
Well, in fact, what I find now is that the way to see films as or to see films as a way to see the unconscious is in a way the same way the analyst and the patient interact. I mean, like throwing hypotheses, changing perspectives, trying to get to a truth, right? And that's basically what an analysis is: throwing hypotheses all the time and see if they can be proved or not.
And most importantly, and this is not so much seen by people who are not in that world, but analysts aren't just sitting there thinking on their own. You've got 4 supervisors. If you're lucky, you got 4. Maybe you only have 1. Well, you're bouncing stuff off of them all the time and working through these things, which is exactly what we do with movies. We talk about them with each other and try to understand what's going on. Oh gosh, you said something that triggered a thought that now has left me, but yeah, I lost it, but it'll come back. It'll come back.
Okay. I don't know, Natalia, Waran, do you want to join the conversation?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I understand that Roger is proposing a model to read the films, but I don't know. I think that that proposal is very well in some kind of films or some kind of characters. I think that characters with schizophrenia, it's very well all this split of characters making a synthesis of the sick. But I ask if maybe in a movie, maybe like Mommy from Xavier Dolan, or maybe a movie from Woody Allen. Woody Allen's movie, is that possible? I don't know. It's possible.
I have a couple. Can you mention those two directors again? Were they directors or writers?
Xavier Dolan and Woody Allen.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing it. Could we type them in the
Okay, in the chat.
I just want to make sure. Okay.
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 Yes. Thank you, Paul.
Great. Wonderful. Okay. Woody Allen. Woody Allen, I think, is a pretty easy. I think we could do it with Woody Allen pretty easily. All of his stuff is much later, so it would be dealing with the Big Lebowski is a really interesting one. Well, not a really interesting one. It's actually probably a pretty common one, that it's dealing with early childhood, and the Freudian analyst loves to stay in early childhood, and all the theory is kind of baked around that, and everything else later on just kind of like, oh yeah, it's because of that. Like it all calls back, right? That there's something there. There's part of our childhood that never loses as we get older. But there is a lot more. I don't think that we can just understand everything that goes on in the adult, the fully phallic phase, the genital phase, the psyche that can only be understood in terms of that. There's other aspects of it, and I think Woody Allen would be, if I was to put it into this context, would be a great place to look for, how do those things later on sort of how can we analyze them in isolate rather than using them to refer back to earlier on. And I think that would open up something, I don't know, an interesting way of looking at the psyche, the adult psyche in isolation, which is actually what you do in cognitive behavioral therapy or dialectical behavioral therapy. Is you're really looking at how can we adjust this person in the moment without having to necessarily understand everything that they went through before. Doesn't mean it can't be. I think it might just. I actually, you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, watching a Woody Allen movie is probably closer to the standard experience of being an analyst with a patient, because you don't have you have like glancing references to some of this stuff, but it's always like disguised by the character kind of lying to themselves or lying. You can't tell which one they're lying to whenever they talk to the camera. So I think the Woody Allen movies might be closer to a standard analytic uncertainty, whereas the Coen Brothers movies, whatever it all holds, give us a little more direct access to the unconscious. So Woody Allen movies, no surprise, are more neurotic than something that's perhaps a little more mature. And of course, Woody Allen as a writer, very fun, funny, interesting, but he's Arrested Development, point in case, right? I wanted to. So okay, and so the criticism would be, there are some movies that might not be accessible to this kind of analysis, and I would definitely agree with you, and I might even say like movies that aren't accessible to this kind of analysis just aren't really good movies. That's a bad way to put it, but I might want to go out there and think about actually test that a little bit. But on the other side, there are people and psyches that are unanalyzable. So it might fit that you wouldn't be able. There might it could fit in somehow. Maybe Williams. I have not watched Javier Dolan, or maybe I have. I just did not know it. So I'm looking up that one.
He's Canadian, I think.
It's
Javier
Canadian.
Yeah, it's Canadian.
Yeah.
I'm not a
One of
film
his-
buff. I'm very much I have fun watching. I mean, I'm not an academic. Yeah. Anyways, I'm not. I might not know some of the really famous ones that everybody else knows, but I'm going to look that one up and see what I can find. The other thing that came up. Okay, so if let's take that some films might not be accessible. Okay, maybe I can explain that away, right? Maybe I could say, oh well, that's just not analyzed. That's of course what Freud did, right? Okay, all right. So you might be like, well, no, that just means you have a bad theory. So what do you mean it's not analyzable? You just have, and something that popped up earlier that is now coming back to me in this context, really thankfully, is that what are our other options when we're examining film? And I think, and the other options, I don't like them. And I can give reasons. We only got 10 minutes left, but I can, you can analyze characters in and of themselves. So like one way to do the Big Lebowski would be, I'm going to analyze the dude, right? The dude is a middle-aged man, and I'm going to give some kind of diagnosis to who the dude is, right? So we can analyze characters. I don't really like that because there's just so much more going on in movies. Like there's got to be something more than, you can't just analyze a character. I don't know that would be a really good way to learn about psychology, learn about the psyche, or teach this stuff. Or if you write a paper just sort of analyzing one character in or aspect of the movie, I think we're missing a lot. So I don't like that idea. I also don't really like the idea that we're analyzing anything about the writer or the auteur. I feel like in that case, we're just doing a lot of work and we don't get a lot of payoff for it, because of course it's kind of like when like if you just started studying math and you got to Newton, you were like, oh my gosh, this is like everything that's true in the world. But of course, math has made so much more progress and you got stuck reading Newton. I think if we try to analyze the auteur, well, the auteur is now 3 years ahead of us. So we're missing a lot by doing that. So there's got to be some, so it can't be worthless to analyze the movie if the auteur is right. There's got to be something we can get out of it. And I think, you know, my sort of theory kind of fills that gap. And then it comes from the Kahir's approach, this sort of pastiche, this coming together, this cultural critique, this deconstruction and reframing. There's a big part of me that wants to take film as it is, rather than trying to force it into something. And there are certainly cases where when I'm doing this kind of analysis, I think I am forcing the film into it. So I obviously, you know, have a little issue there. But at the same time, I think that as what happened with The Big Lebowski and what happened with A Serious Man when I was watching it, this just felt, it just went, you know, it just slid right off the tongue, right? It was just like that. It was not difficult to write a paper like this because it just came so naturally. And so I think there's something to that, even though parts of it, as we've discussed here, you know, probably could have been refined or might have been wrong. I love that part about Sam Elliott's character in there. So, and I imagine that if I look at other movies where it seems like it's difficult to do this type of thing, or if I'm trying to fit it into a theory, there's got to be a way that I can look at it that would be amenable to this kind of analysis, rather than me trying to, you know, use some other way of breaking it apart to try to say something else that could be going on, as though that's what you're supposed to be doing. I don't know how helpful that was. That was really helpful for me. I got a lot of out of that little rant, but I don't know if you got anything helpful out of that.
Yeah, the movie is a product of an unconscious, yes, but we can take or make an analysis of a movie in many ways. You have mentioned the psychoanalysis of the author. I hate that, yeah. and the psychoanalysis of the scene, of the characters, and maybe the fantasies, the dreams inside the movie. There are many ways. Yeah. But I think that you are really making an original work with this purpose. But yeah, I think that sometimes one can feel some forced, some elements, maybe like to think some characters are the superego, some characters the oral fixation, etc. I think that maybe when we think the movie as a product of the unconscious, we can find something relevant to understand the psyche.
Yeah, it is. I definitely think it is a little odd to anthropomorphize aspects of the psyche in terms of these characters, and you don't have to. I mean, so there's ways you can watch. If you know, if I'm going to defend the theory, why not for a second? I think it doesn't have to be character based in terms of where you assign each thing, that each sort of concept or structure that's in the Freudian model. You know, it could be, you know, a grouping of events. It could be any type of thing that you're. I think the important part is limiting, and this might be a lesson for analysts too, limiting our analysis to what's on the screen. Like when the patient's there, we limit our analysis to what's going on in the analytic session, rather than if the patient starts talking about, oh, I was out to dinner with my friends last night, and they just won't stop talking about the fun they have, are not getting wrapped up in that, right? When you're trying to do the analysis, you're trying to keep everything. Ideally, the patient's sitting there telling you how much they hate you. You're getting the most information. The struggle with film, and I think, and I had not put it this way before, and so thank you very much for raising it, is what I just said. I think trying to stay with what's going on the screen, rather than letting yourself get to the author or get to the social critique or get to this thing or get to that thing. And I think that, and now that I'm thinking of it, that might be what always bugs me, is when somebody watches a movie and then they start thinking, this is what really bugs me. Somebody watches a movie and then they're like, oh, that meant so much to my life. I'm like, what are you talking about? It means nothing to your life. There's nothing to do with that. I get that you had an experience watching it, and it was, but saying that it meant so much to you and you're going to live your life around because of this kind of movie, I just think that, I don't know. And I think that if we taught people to watch movies the way I'm suggesting, they wouldn't have discussions like that I find terribly boring.
You yourself
Yeah. Okay, Paulo.
Yeah, sorry to hop in like that. But the thing that you just mentioned, that the person watching the film reacts in a way that he or she thinks that, oh my God, this is me. This is so me. People do that all the time. But I think that will be another kind of analysis, because if we think about the conversation that occurs between a film and the person watching it, or the 100 conversations that occur between those two actors in a movie theater, it will be interesting to see what happens there, because obviously not every single reaction, not every single chain of thought is going to be the same, as the movie goes on. And so I think about Woody Allen that you were talking about, and the movie The Rose from El Cairo, which is basically this, how the movie doesn't stop in the screen, but it also goes beyond, like literally goes beyond the film. But we can think about how we are affected by this, how we change our behavior based on not only movies, but also books or any kind of narrative. So that might be another one to add to the list, this kind of analysis of film. And also, I think about Gonzalo Requena, which is a Spanish author that we work with. I don't really know if he has anything translated. Wilson might know, but it's worth mentioning. So this guy works with a theory that is based on something that he called the burning point. Might be an approximation to translation. So the burning point is that very specific moment that you can pinpoint to the very, frame and the very second of the film in which something happens. You see something, you hear something that just goes, like boom, in your head, in your unconscious. And then you go like, oh, that is so me. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
I love that. I will thank you. I love that. And I'm going to double down on what I sort of just said. So the thinking, oh, that's so me, or oh, I see that myself so much in this, or oh, that has had such an effect on me. The analyst, and in this case, the viewer, the analyst in particular, especially. So maybe this is why I'm saying this is when psychoanalysts watch movies, they should do it this way. If you start to have that feeling when you're a teacher too, when you start to have that feeling as a teacher, that countertransference moment, right? That's dangerous, right? That's where you get in trouble, because you were just trying to feed the student because you thought they were hungry, but you accidentally gave them peanuts and you didn't realize they were allergic. You were trying to help, but oh no, now the poor kid. And as an analyst, that's just the worst possible thing you can do. act on that countertransference. And so going back to the movie, I think, okay, maybe it's fine for people out there to have this life-changing experience, but no, it's not fine to do that. I think that's acting on the countertransference, and that's precisely the thing we've got to be careful not to act on. Now, this is coming from, again, a kind of hardline Freudian perspective. There's other ways you could do psychoanalysis that are much more engaging. I'm thinking of I Heart Huckabees. If we're going to consider Dustin Hoffman's character and psychoanalyst in that I mean, they're very trying not to involve themselves. Well, no, they involve themselves. Anyways, my point is, watch out for countertransference. If nothing else gets through, which I don't think nothing else I've got. I think a lot has gotten through. This has been amazingly fun and helpful. Thank you very much. Are we done at 4, or are we? Was this booked for 2 hours? You tell me.
Well, if you have time, I think we can be like 20 minutes more.
Sure.
Is it okay?
Sure.
Is that okay with you? Okay.
Sure. I didn't want to run you guys over. So,
okay.
Yeah. No, please. I'm loving this. Thank you.
Yeah. Going back to the characters. Well, you said there are. I don't remember if you said there are people or there are characters. Well, people, I think, who are unanalyzable. I think that's the case. Well, that's my hypothesis of Walter. Like Walter is the character who is always in possession of the truth. Like he never doubts. And in a way, to be in an analysis, you have to be very, very, very neurotic or partially neurotic. I understand that the neurotic is the one who doubts. The psychotic is always certain. Is always certain of everything. Well, I have to admit that I didn't understand very much when you said that Donnie is a good example of the oral phase, because well, that's obvious in the dude. I mean, he's constantly drinking his white rations with milk. He loves his milk mixed with vodka and coffee. It's a coffee cream or something like that. But well, you said, well, he's always been shut up. It's like he's always in a passive attitude. So passivity is like a trait of the oral phase.
So, getting back to my right here. So I'd be careful about, if we're taking what I'm saying is right, I'd be careful about saying something like Walter is unanalyzable. I can imagine if I talked to a person who seemed like Walter in the world, and I was interacting with, I actually don't think that Walter or somebody with an anal fixation would be unanalyzable. It would be there would be a lot of probably missed sessions, so it would just be difficult to analyze them. When they're in there, I imagine actually if you got Walter on the couch, he would just be quiet. It would probably be a couple of years of him being quiet until he started talking. Look at me trying to do this. All right. So anyway, but I was going to say, Kevin, because of the way I'm suggesting we watch the movie, we shouldn't try to analyze Walter individually, but as a piece of the psyche as a whole. And so when I'm saying that Walter, it resembles sort of the anal phase and Donnie represents the oral phase, what I mean is the psyche that is the film at one point prior was going through the oral phases and all of the conflicts that arise during that phase. And that would actually probably be a really boring movie, I would think. And then, okay, so now the psyche that is going for, growing, gets into the sort of what has been pegged relatively artificially as the anal phase of development. still has the oral phase with them. Like you still have all of those fixations and all those experiences and those traumas with you the whole time. They don't go away, especially in a psyche that is sort of split as young youthful psyches are. Like they have not fused, right? They're not a full person in a sense. And so as they're, as you're progressing through these phases, you don't just sort of like blink into one and then everything else disappears, but it's kind of with you the whole time. And you are kind of in a dialogue with other parts of your mind. And so now when we get to, and so now, having gotten through the anal phase, and we could try to analyze what types of experiences and traumas did the psyche that is the Big Lebowski experience during the anal phase. We could probably try to do that. And same thing with the oral phase by analyzing, what is Donnie like? How is Donnie reacting to this? Then we could try to figure out what those earlier fixations were. And then we're doing, at that point, we're doing the analysis that you'd be doing with the patient on the couch, trying to work your way backwards from everything that they're saying and interpret it. And I think there's some space to do that. But in the way that I'm suggesting we watch the movies is, again, back to the earlier point, trying to remain with the patient where they are and having that discipline to stay with them as they're going. So I don't know that I would try to analyze Walter or Donnie, although it might be interesting. And to the milk and the White Russian, that the dude is sort of, you never lose those other parts of you. And maybe just, I'm just defending my theory here. Maybe drinking the milk is sort of him trying to integrate with the other two. Like, come on, Donnie, I'm drinking the milk. Come on, just fuse in here and stop being a separate person in the film. There's something there about that. I guess, long story short, I'm wondering how much room there is to try to see backward, to see where the film as a psyche was previously. I'm wary of that, but I don't know that it's impossible or not worthwhile. I'm just trying to see how. Now I'm also thinking, if a film has been made, then the psyche that is that film is by definition analyzable. Unanalyzable films wouldn't get made. I realize that I'm getting old. I'm thinking out loud a lot here, and I really appreciate the space that you're giving me to do that. Yeah.
I was about to say that earlier on when you were talking about unanalyzable, /analyzable. Yeah, it's just that the type of analysis that you apply to that film would change. Because if you have a more commercial film, normally we wouldn't be interested in doing a paper about that. But we can just, switch the focus and do a more socially centered analysis or whatnot. But since we're all working here with psychoanalysis and related topics, well, I think we're forced in a way to look at movies that sit down and think about themselves, that are not just made for the money, like the Avengers or these kind of films. So that's where people say, like, it's a bad movie, it's a good movie. Yeah, well, it depends. If you work on making analysis about commercial films, it's a really good movie because you can do a lot with that. But then we have our own type of movies.
You know what? I was just thinking the event. I was thinking of the Avengers too. Like I was just thinking of those. Okay, take that movie as a psyche, right? We're not going to analyze any of the specific characters in there. We're going to try to figure out which of the characters represent what in the psyche. The Avengers, not that, okay, look, it's fun watching the Avengers movie. I have fun watching them, right? But now I'm trying to think, like, what would it be like to do an analysis of one of those movies? It would be like a person who comes in and sits on the couch and like prepared. they prepared to be analyzed. Here's everything that I can tell you about my mother. Here's everything I can tell you about my father. You know, here's everything that my husband did to me. Here's everything that this. What do you think? And it's like, I need more time. Let's see what you do when you're not prepared, right? That's where I'm really going to get some of the interesting material here. So I think it would just be, I think that an experienced analyst would, and they probably do, fall asleep during those movies because they're just so boring.
Yeah. Yeah, but then again, I'm thinking of the guy that I mentioned earlier, Gonzalo Requena. Some months ago, we were talking about this movie, The Bride of Frankenstein. I don't know if you heard about it, of seeing it. But from what, for example, Wilson thought, it was awful. Yeah, I wouldn't grade it awful. I would grade it just like meh. But then Gonzalo Requena comes in and he analyzes every single thing within the movie, and then you go, wow, because you're mind blown, because there are things that are unconscious there and that he sees in a movie that wouldn't be worthwhile to a person like me. And so he analyzes the antenna coming out from the castle and receiving the light, and it's a phallic expression that gives life to this new creature, and then you go like, well, yeah, it is. So the border kind of fuses because you don't really see where a good or a bad movie finishes or ends, and that's something nice about analyzing films.
I'd say something about that. There's a, and this will be true of earlier films, 50s, 60s, even when Freud, nowadays Freud and psychoanalysis generally is like kind of joked at almost, except for in something. But back then that was like medical science. I mean, that was psychiatry, was doing that type of stuff. And so there was a lot of there's a lot of motifs. The couple gets together and they're gonna lay have sex, and then it shows like a train going through a tunnel, right? And it's a very intentional expression of what it's trying to get at. And I'm thinking of that scene as a very intentional expression, and not that that's not wrong or not interesting to try to pick out. I think it is interesting to try to pick those out. What's unique about the Coens is just how obvious and subtle it is the entire time, and why I think that they are so great, and so really great movies and fun movies to analyze. I mean, okay, again, you wouldn't write a paper about if the film that the psyche that is the Avengers was on your couch, you wouldn't write a paper about that one unless you were writing a paper about boring patients. But you get like a really great patient in there, like you're going to write a paper because like there's something that's learned in this one that you want to show to other analysts so that they can continue exploring that thing that happened. And I can certainly actually, take that Bride of Frankenstein in its time, and that scene and that meaning that's associated with it. At that time, that might not have been so obvious to everybody watching it, but now, watching it, we can see, oh, that's a relic of Freudian, right concepts, right? And so, there is interest. But at the time, it might not have been that clear exactly what it was. So analyzing it at that time might have been more interesting than us analyzing it now, almost like reading some of Freud's papers on I'm just blanking on any of the names right now, on papers on hysteria. We're like, that's misogynistic. That's like, why are you talking about women this way, Freud? Like, you're obviously wrong about that. It's something, other stuff is going on, and that's that's true. So there's an element of that where now these days, and actually this might be an interesting question that I wonder what you all think. So the Coens are making movies ahead of their prime 10 years ago, back to 95 through 2010, right? And at the time, and probably still is today, certainly, a an awesome blend of what I said earlier. What did I say earlier? You know, like obviousness, but also, you know, the subtlety. And that's sort of the tension that really pulls a lot of us into them, and really loving those movies. There's so much to find in them. Compared to stuff that's sort of coming out today, I don't know. I don't. Is there any good movies today? No, we got. Have you seen any good movies lately? Now I'm thinking, I really haven't. I haven't seen a good movie in a couple of years. I didn't watch Parasite though.
Probably
Everybody says
Monk.
about Monk. Is that the one with Rami? Who's in that
Rami
one?
Malek? I don't think so.
Yeah, that's not the one.
No, it's this guy who wrote for Orson Welles. It's a black and white film.
Yes, I
recent.
watched that.
Yeah.
Gary
Very old one, yeah.
Oldman was in that. That was awesome. Never mind. I did see a good movie recently.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. The obvious and subtle combination is just a killing one. And I think it's constant in their films. But since we're talking about the Lebowski, there's this scene at the bowling alley where I forgot about the name of the character, but Goodman, you know, Jeff Goodman, Walter, he takes a gun from his bag. And he goes like, "You're entering a world of pain," and he menaces this guy. And I thought about that, since you are describing him as being in the anal phase, being prone to action and kind of violent, and like he's talking the Vietnam War, and he's also representing, well, again, the anal phase. If I may be overanalyzing, but the anal phase is just before the phallic phase, where the superego is formed, right?
Oral, anal, Oedipal complex. I put
Right.
the Oedipal phase as an Oedipal phase rather than a complex. And then phallic, and then genital. That's the gospel.
All right, and so
You know, but
Walter's-
that doesn't have to be true. That doesn't have to be that way. That just seems that way.
So Walter being right before the Oedipal phase that you're mentioning, that also puts him before the superego gets formed or gets, you know. So that's it, and the sentence, "You're entering a world of pain," made me think about, you know, life. It's like if someone came to your life as a baby and told you you're entering a world of pain.
So what's so okay? So the oral phase, and now that I was actually just started thinking that like each of those phase, the oral and the earliest phase, are both about gaps. So like it's the oral phase, like your mouth, because you're fixated on putting stuff in your mouth, like kids put stuff in their mouth, they try or all over it. And then the anal phase is the other gap, the other hole in your on the other side. You know, and you start to, and the thought is that you start to, you know, when you're in the oral phase, everything that you're experiencing is about around the mouth. Like you don't like have your ears, like in your hair. It's all extensions of your mouth. And then, you know, the anal phase, you start to realize there's another part of your body that you start to go, you know, poop. And it's like, oh my God, what's going on? What's going on here? And so, and I didn't think that you're entering a world of pain. I mean, it could have been the first time that he had spicy food or something. And it was like, holy moly. I don't know. I mean, like, watch out. Just wait till the shift or the burning point or the something happens to you, dude. You know, wait till what gets you into your conflict, your tension, your trauma that will ignite you to the next phase of development. Like for you, it's going to be a world of pain. And what's Donnie? He's just like, nah, man, it's I just keep getting fed. I don't care, whatever. Yeah. You're in the world of pain.
But I don't know if you dealt with that in your paper. I don't remember.
I didn't.
It's this
I
this structure Freud proposed to, like the ego is between the id, the desire, and the super ego, which is like the norm, the rules, etc. You can also think about Donnie and the dude himself as being like representations of the ego, in the sense that they're always receiving orders. Shut up, come here, we're gonna pick you up. It's interesting. They live in a
It's
kind of passivity.
No, that's exactly it. Well, so the id is this catch-all term for a more complex, dynamic between the death drive and the life drive, and Theros and Anos, Eros and Thanos. Oh my God, Avengers. Okay, so and sort of like those reservoirs of energy, and then the superego is this this structure that is formed during the Oedipal complex to replace the father that was and the father is supposed to be there stopping you from doing stupid stuff, through like kind of being mean or whatever. And then once you've gone through the Oedipal phase, the father's killed off, right? Because if you did it right, you killed off your father and you took your mother. And then you've got to replace that somehow. And so forming a good super ego, which keeps you getting a nice haircut all the time and shaving and brushing your teeth. Clearly, I didn't do very well with that one. So that you can present, do well in society or whatever. And then the ego, right? So the phases, the oral, anal, Oedipal phallic phase, those are phases of the ego. So the ego changes throughout each of those things. And your ego, the you-ness, the you are, the one giving the orders in a sense, is right. It's an integration of all of those together. So absolutely, Walter, Donnie, and the dude are a disintegrated ego, as you would expect for a psyche that has not gone through the integration process of the Oedipal phase. So that's very much where I'm going with this. And so whenever I watch a movie, it's like, okay, first thing I might want to do is figure out what phase of development are we in right now? And you can do that, I think, looking at the tension. What is the trauma going on in the movie? Each phase has a trauma associated with it. So where's the tension? Where's the conflict? What's the trauma? And what's the kind of the essence of it? And then looking at the other characters, how do all these characters match up sort of with, elements that we know to be ubiquitous throughout the psyche, your anal fixations, your oral fixations, the traumatic experience you had during the Oedipal complex, you wouldn't really see the neuroses of the film, because that would be something that would be presented to you at a conscious level. I mean, you're often conscious of your neurosis. I'm biting my nails, right? I'm conscious that I know I'm biting my nails, right? That's my neurosis. I don't know why I'm biting my nails. I've got to go back and figure out what's pumping me to do that. So trying to figure out, situate yourself in the film, and then figure out what are all the, in the film. So let's say the conscious represent the person that you're acting. So if the film is the unconscious, there is a person out there somewhere, which we don't get to see because we're just seeing the unconscious. That's kind of the thing, right? When you're seeing a person on the couch, all you have is what they present to you, and that's their conscious self that they're presenting to you. You've got to interpret your way into the unconscious. If we are able to see the unconscious through film, well, now we've got to actually do an interpretation to figure out what that person is really like, if it's even worthwhile to do that, which I don't think it is. It's good enough that the goal is to get to the unconscious, to figure out what's going on. And the outer shell, the outerness of it is just a barrier to that. So I'm thinking I would not want to analyze back out to the original person, but I wouldn't want to see that the person is biting their nails, but I might notice something in the movie, and I might have a thought that like, oh, that person's super annoying. I bet whoever that character is super annoying. I bet that character's causing the real person to start biting their nails in one form or another. But then again, that's getting away from what's on the screen, which I want to try to resist. This has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate it. I don't know if you got as much of it as I did. But
Um, well, as we're probably running out of time, I would like to. Okay, I would like to um, ask you about this. What I find again very interesting in your paper is that like you're leading a line of argumentation in a way. But at the very end, you say, well, and how about if we think this in other terms? It's like a turn of the screw, and you deal with schizophrenia because we have been dealing too much about the phases. Can you expand on that?
Okay, so where I trained, this is a relic of how I trained in psychoanalysis, is the way that they train psychoanalysts in the way I learned is to put you with people who present in a schizophrenic way. And you can either do that with dementia patients. They present in ways that could be misunderstood and certainly was misunderstood as dementia praecox, as schizophrenia, schizophrenia, or actually going in. So their method of training was just kind of throw you in the deep end. Because schizophrenia in itself as well, I mean, there is no barrier between what's going on in that person's mind and this is the theory from the psychoanalytic perspective, at least the one that I was sort of trained in, is that in schizophrenia, you are seeing the unconscious, like you are seeing it. There is no mediation. There is no ego. There is no thing there. So that's very much like watching a movie. I'm trying to, I don't have exactly what I wrote or what I meant by that, but I'm thinking
like
right
the dude like a schizophrenic in the sense that he's living in a world of fantasy. He's like, he wants to.
So actually there I am doing what I sort of just talked about before, is trying to figure out what is the person, right? Trying to analyze from the unconscious out to what the person that is the Big Lebowski. So suppose that is an unconscious and it is attached to a consciousness somewhere, a conscious being somewhere. What would that person be like? And okay, I'm speculating there that all of the things that went wrong during the Big Lebowski's Oedipal phase, in that he did not integrate, right, by the end of it. I mean, Donnie dies off, Walter's still sort of around, but it was not a smooth process. And actually there's even Donnie sprayed all over him, right? So he's not rid of Donnie at all. He's got Donnie all over him and probably inhaled some of him as well. And so the schizophrenic is not integrated, theoretically, right? So no ego sort of forms, no super ego does its work. And actually we see he stays out of Malibu, sort of. Actually, I don't even know, is that scene at the end in Malibu? But and Sam Elliott's character, I guess that's the therapist, has no impact, which actually you would expect in the case of the schizophrenic patient, the therapist having zero impact on from a therapeutic perspective. You can't treat schizophrenia therapeutically. That is changing. There are plenty of really great treatment programs out there is that really schizophrenia? These are other questions. Yeah, I would imagine that the person who is that, not the outside of the conscious part, maybe that's what's going on inside the head of the schizophrenic. It's the Big Lebowski happening. Maybe that's what we expect that they went through. And that is pure speculation. We'd have to analyze a whole bunch of movies and analyze a whole bunch of patients and sync up what we can sync up. That'd be like doing quantum mechanics. That would just be crazy. See, like this research program's never going to take off. Nobody's going to do this. which is whatever. I guess, what did Heisenberg have to do to get that thing? Now I'm being grandiose. I gotta cut this out.
Okay, are there any other comments, questions here or on YouTube?
No comments so far.
No comments so far. Okay. Right.
My friend. All right.
Well, if there are no more comments, I would like to thank you, Roger, again for your kindness. It was a pretty interesting talk. And we hope to read your book. Let's see how we can get it. Maybe through Amazon. Is
I
that
think you can order it on Amazon. If you do read that, you'd be maybe one of 20 people who does. I would, even a note that says this is completely ridiculous, I would really. The book is just, if you care to know, it is a Bayesian model of the Freudian unconscious. I don't know if that I'll just go leave it at that. If you do read that, please call me and tell me what you think. Okay,
Yeah, sure. We have to keep the contact.
great. No,
Definitely.
please.
Yes. Okay. So bye-bye and thank you and take care.
Thank you all very much.
Bye, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks
Bye.
a lot. Thanks for